So good afternoon, everyone. So for this afternoon, we will be discussing the scope and the limitation of your study. Okay, and this will be the objectives for this afternoon. So you will differentiate the scope and the delimitation of the study that you are making. Aside from that, you will also justify the significance or the importance of the scope and the delimitation of your own study. Afterwards, you will write and you will present your own scope and delimitation of your study. But before we proceed to any of those, let us first define, okay, what is the scope of the study? What is the delimitation? Let us take it one by one. Okay, so what is the scope of the study? When you say the scope of the study, you can see there that the keywords are already boldened. Okay, so when you say the scope of the study, this clearly sets what a study covers. Okay, so this includes the time of the study, when the study will take place. This will involve also the location or the locale of the study or where the study will take place. This will also involve the subjects or what we call the participants of the study. Okay, it will also include the context or the subject matter of the study, as well as the specific objectives of your study. Now, when we say the delimitation, the delimitation of your study, the aim of this is to narrow down the scope of your study. Now, for you to not be confused, you just have to remember this. When we say the scope of the study, you will state here everything that will be discussed, everything that will be present in your study. Okay, so everything that will be used, okay, everything that will be analyzed in your study, you state that here, okay, in the scope of the study. When we say the delimitation of the study, okay, from the root word limit, mind you, when we say the delimitation of the study, you will state here everything that will not be discussed in your study. Everything that will not be involved in your study, you have to state that here under delimitation. Okay, so if you remember, now what I have mentioned during our previous discussions in quantitative research, now we will only deal with the variables that are stated in our study. So anything else that is not stated in the variables, we will not be using that, or we will not be involving that in the study. Okay, and that is the purpose of this. Okay, that is the purpose of the scope and delimitation, so that you yourselves as the researchers and the readers who will peruse your study later on will not be confused about your study. Okay, so let's have an example. When you compose the scope of the study, look at the left side of the screen. It should look like this. Okay, so remember, when you compose the scope of your study, state here the respondents of your study, as well as the locale of your study. State here also the context of your study or what your study will be about, and then state here also the objectives of your study, or rather what your study aims to achieve. And then if you look at the right side of the screen, when you compose the delimitation of the study, it should look like this. So remember, anything that will not be involved in the study, anything that will not be discussed or used in the study, state that here in the delimitation. So here are some guidelines on how you can compose your scope and delimitation of the study. So the first is you have to restate briefly the general purpose of the study. Okay, so you have to put that first, okay, because that will establish the variables needed in your study, okay, as well as the entire context of your study. Okay, so you first state that. Next, you have to stick to the subject matter and the topics that will be studied and discussed. So for the scope of your study, state that there. State all of the subject matter, state all of the topics, state the variables that will be involved in your study, state there what your study will be about. Now, for the delimitation part, state there what your study will not be about. State there the subject matter or the topics that will not be discussed in your study. State also in the delimitation the variables that will not be used in the study. Next, you have to stick to the locale and the participants of your study. Okay, so in under scope of the study, you have to state there the locale where the study will take place. State there also who the participants of the study will be. Under the delimitation, state that, rather state there the locations where your study will not take place. State there also under the delimitation the participants who will not be involved in your study. Okay? So next, you have to stick to the population and the methodology on how respondents will be selected. Okay, so if you remembered, well, we have mentioned that in quantitative research, we have what we call sampling techniques in choosing our respondents. So whatever sampling technique that you have already established now from the start, you stick with that. Okay, you stick to the sampling technique that you have established. Okay, so that falls under scope. So the sampling technique that you will not use for the study, state that under the scope, or rather under the delimitation of your study. Regarding the methodology, under the scope, so you state there how you're going to choose the respondents, state there also any criteria that you have in choosing your respondents. For the delimitation, state there now the criteria that you will not use for choosing your respondents. State also under the delimitation any methodology that you will not use in your study. Then lastly, you have to stick to the time period of the study. So for example, if your study is an academic research, or let's say if it's a research that will be held within the school, so you have to state there the school year when the study will take place. That falls under scope. When we talk of the delimitation of the study, you have to state there the time period or the school year when the study will not take place, or the time period that no longer involves the study. Okay? If you have any questions, you can reach me through the email address stated here. You can also refer to the lines of communication that I have posted in our class group chat and in our Google Classroom. Thank you so much for joining me in this video for this afternoon, and I will see you guys in the next one.